1, 2, 3, 4. Alive and well, I'm wide awake. Won't take your brand, I'm not your slave. You serve your God, Lord of the flies. I pity you when you meet mine. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. Your bloody mouth unsatisfied. God sees the trap you set for me. He'll not be mocked, I will be free. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Your fear will not make me behave. I won't march in your masked parade. Your hollow threats won't shut me up. I won't bow down, enough's enough. You say you'll give us what we need, as if you own the air we breathe. Stand up 100 million strong. Thought we'd lie down, well you thought wrong. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, just keep going, keep on going. Jesus with me every step. Just keep going, keep on going. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus closer than my breath. Just keep going, keep on going. Alive and well, I'm wide awake. Won't take your brand, I'm not your slave. You serve your God, Lord of the flies. I pity you and you mean mine. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. Your bloody mouth unsatisfied. God sees the trap you set for me. He'll not be mocked, I will be free. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Your fear will not make me behave. I won't march in your masked parade. Your hollow threats won't shut me up. I won't bow down, enough's enough. You say you'll give us what we need, as if you own the air we breathe. Stand up 100 million strong. Thought we'd lie down, well you thought wrong. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Oh, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus with me every step. Just keep going, keep on going. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus closer than my breath.
Make sure to share this out.
Keep on going.
You got the time. Here's the time to let people know. About 1 minute.
We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down. We'll never give in, never give up, never back down. We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender. Oh, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus with me every step. Just keep going, keep on going. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus closer than my breath.
Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Town Hall again after like a month of a bit of a hiatus. We've been very busy with different projects happening, both with Ben and Teresa and myself, and we're really glad to be back, have you with us. Make sure that you share these links out. Make sure you let people know on Facebook that you're watching, that we have a platform here in Illinois. This will also get mirrored out to other locations as well, but this is our chance to make sure that we have someone other than my cat watching the show. So in about 1 minute, we'll be back, and it'll be Ben and I talking about criticisms of the Constitution. And this is the first time into the show that we have left the link in our Telegram open for anyone who wants to join us on this show. So make sure to let people know, check the link out there, and we hope to talk to you here on Rebuild Illinois, number 30.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Rebuild Illinois, where we get to talk about how we, the people, take charge and make Illinois a great place to live again.
Well, here we are. We're back. I think I caught Ben off guard there for half a second. Let me unmute him for a second there.
There we go. Yeah,
So
just in my
today-
pad, so
That's
got me.
good. That's good. No, it's all right. I was trying to adjust
Yeah.
my chair, my lower lumbar. You know, I did turn 50 between the last show and this show. So
Still,
happy birthday.
still
to
a
you.
young man. Come
Still a
back
pain
when
in
you're
the ass.
52.
Okay, got it. Deal. So just real quick updates. It's been a little time. Hopefully, you know, I had originally planned that we would be spending some time, Ben, doing a lot of debates. We're still trying to get interviews. That has not been a simple thing. We kind of been a little hamstringed in areas, but I could at least give you this information.
Well,
We do
it's
know-
hard sometimes to get politicians to respond, and
Right.
especially if they're running their own campaign, which they should not do. But
I'm
Um,
half tempted to just keep this thing running the full time between now and the next 2 weeks, as much as I possibly can. But we'll see how much I can delegate out. But we are only, as you can see in the ticker below, 16 days from the Republican primary. A little over 2 weeks, guys. This is where things heat up. If we can pull off something, it may have to be virtual at this point. But if we can get everybody on the same screen, we'll do our best to try and pull that off. So I've got feelers out there still waiting to hear back. And we are 149 days away from the actual decision that will change the state of Illinois, at least for the next upcoming couple of years.
and
I'm sure a lot of people will be deciding whether or not to pack boxes after that day.
yeah,
And we hope they don't. But
and the nation. By the way, you know, we talk about two news elements, of course. One would be inflation, and the other would be, you know, the expected results. And you hear even from CNN. So talk about expected results of this election. Even CNN is saying that this is going to be a bad year to be a Democrat politician.
wow, yeah, that's a big deal.
And you look here in Illinois, it's kind of doubly so because, you know,
Hey, even some of the Democrats are running as Republicans in the state of Illinois, as far as we can see.
yeah, yeah,
I actually threatened, by the way, I don't know if you heard this. I thought might entertain you. I was trying to collect all of the pieces of junk mail I've been getting from the Irving campaign, because we're obviously not fooled here.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And I'm like, I think I have enough to make like a children's book.
Did you get that newspaper style ad he sent out? Oh my
It's
goodness.
ridiculous.
Obviously, his campaign has a lot of money
I wonder
because
how.
I would get multiple mailers from these big, you know, 8.5 by 11 mailers or 8 by 10, whatever they are, from the Urban campaign, multiple per day.
Hey,
You know?
if he wants to jump in and explain that he's, he can have a shot jumping in here. Dude, the link's in the Telegram, Richard, if you happen to be watching. I doubt you are. But you're welcome to jump in and explain to us how you are absolutely and always have been a Republican, dyed-in-the-wool constitutional conservative. We'd love to hear that. Yeah. I doubt that'll happen, though. We've only got 16 days for him to write a script.
That and why he thinks it's valuable to run so many attack ads on his opponents rather than just focusing on his own.
Well, tonight we are going to be covering criticisms. Did I say that? I didn't say that right.
Criticisms. You said it right. And these are not necessarily, when we say criticisms, these are arguments a lot of people bring up about, why the Constitution is bad. And it's by no means complete at all. These are the ones we hear most today.
I need a beer for this conversation.
Yeah. So I threw up a list, but hey, if you're watching, you're watching this live, by all means, you can throw up your question that you've heard that someone
in the comments. Yeah, let us know in the comments. We can pull them up. If you're a little more bold, there is a link in our Telegram group that you could use to actually join, and we'll decide based on how beautiful your face is that we'll add you to our show or not.
It's a low bar, though. So
I mean, look at us.
Yeah.
And speaking of, we do have a guest with us. Mr. Matt Skeetsa has joined us as well. So how's it going, Matt?
Very good. How are you guys?
Good, man.
All right.
I always find it hilarious that we have to get online to talk sometimes when I could hear you literally from here.
I know. Don't throws distance, literally.
Well, that's just the modern world.
I know.
Yeah.
We all don't sit on our front porches anymore like our grandparents used to.
Well, I'm going to take this show. I'm going to center it here on you, Ben. You've got a lot to go over tonight. I want to try and get us rolling as quick as we can. I do want to give people that notice that if they're interested in hearing about some of these criticisms of the Constitution that Ben will be covering, this is going to be really an interesting show to share out. I think if you ever felt that you needed to educate your friends or you wanted to have clarifications on some of these issues, we've got the quintessential professor of the Constitution going to be sharing his mind on a couple of topics. So now's the time to share that out. Ben, I'm going to turn you loose with the first topic that you threw at us.
Okay, so go ahead and bring.
Does the Constitution protect slavery?
And this is one of those things that I hear even in, or especially in the halls of academia, this idea that the Constitution was a document for slaveholders. In fact, I was looking at an article earlier about it. And we have to understand, if we want to really talk about this, we need to understand it in proper context. When I ask my students, hey, for how long, when did slavery start? And, the answer is always 1619. And I have to say, no, slavery is actually much older than that. In fact, if you look at the records of every civilization back to the beginning, even in that first civilization, there are records of slavery even then. So thousands of years in the past, we have records of slavery. So slavery was not a new thing at all when the United States was created. The other question I asked was, okay, well, where was slavery at when, where did it exist at the time that the Constitution was written? And of course, people say, well, in the United States. Well, that is only a very minuscule part of the truth. The fact is that not only did slavery exist from the beginning of the first civilization that we have records on, but it existed in every civilization without fail. And at the the writing of the Constitution, the whole world operated on slavery. And that then brings into light the fact that the Constitution addresses it, is actually makes the Constitution the most forward-leaning document at the time of its writing with regard to slavery. There are a couple things in there about slavery and about persons who are under bondage. And I use that word because the Constitution does. The Constitution had the framers, the folks who sat down and argued out the structure and the wording of the Constitution. They had to deal with certain basic realities. One of those was that of the 13 states, 16 of them still legalized owning slaves in the United States, in those 6 states. And so the 7 northern abolitionist states outlawed slavery by the time we get to 1787. But those 6 still did. And we just wouldn't have had a country if, one that we know of where it was a united union, had the 7 states stood firm and said, absolutely, you have to get rid of your slaves to join the union. There wouldn't have been a union of 13 states. We would have 2 United States of America instead of 1. And the way they address that is, you often hear about the Great Compromise. Well, the Great Compromise covered 2 things. One was representation in Congress. The other one was dealing with the issue of slavery. And while it specifically does not use the word slaves anywhere in there, so nowhere can you say, the Constitution endorses slavery. No, actually, quite the opposite, because it calls those who were in bondage and in being held as slaves, it calls them persons. And if you go to, natural rights philosophy, which is big at the time, a person had the inalienable right to life, liberty, and pursuit of property. So it sets up the legal argument then to, when they can, to abolish slavery.
Would you have said that it was like an unfinished document, or when they wrote it, that was?
It very much was so. And the framers understood that. They said it was not a perfect document.
Okay.
But it was.
Let me chime in here. One of the things you can check on is, when you look at our founding fathers, you have Thomas Jefferson, and he's probably they use him as an example of a slave owner and a founding father, and point to him as the evil of our founding fathers. But I think if you show and study him a little bit more, he was extremely vocal, especially at the time of independence and afterwards, and the framing of the Constitution, against slavery. He knew that it was an institution that had no life of itself, and eventually it would disappear. And even still, as the country was being set up, in a sense, he had announced that he was freeing the slaves that he had. So, I think our founding fathers were intelligent enough to know that institution wasn't going to be something that's going to hang around much longer.
And you kind of skirt a topic on the issue, and that is, we look back at it over 200 years now with our modern sensibilities, and we disregard where they were in the thought process of the time. And that's what I was trying to say.
The context of history.
Yeah, the context of history at the time was dealing with slavery was not an easy issue at all. And one of the biggest fears of the southern states was, well, they had massive numbers of slaves. They were literally afraid of an uprising if they freed slaves, or if they started to read and learned that they had rights. they were concerned that there would essentially be a civil war in the South of,
between the slaves and their
slave
masters.
against their masters, right?
Right.
And that fear, unfortunately, was well founded because there were a number of rebellions where they killed their masters. And one of the most famous one, of course, is Nat Turner's rebellion?
Yeah.
But that happened after the writing of the Constitution. But it's a good example of what I'm talking about.
Which leads, by the way, perfectly into your next topic.
So anyway, so understand though that the Constitution does not, even though the fugitive slave law was one of those things that had to be included in the Constitution in order to have that compromise, but in actuality, the northern states never really tried to return fugitive slaves. They couldn't block Southern posses from coming up to try to capture.
What an ugly time period.
Yeah, but they for their part didn't actively pursue any fugitive slaves, try to run them down and return them to the South. So that's one part. The other part is dealing with the 3/5, and I guess I should say with the protection of the slave trade, which is in, as some would call it, in Section 9 of Article 1 of the Constitution, where it says, and if we could pull that screen up real quick.
Sure.
Okay, and what we're pulling up, I'll talk about this later. Remind me to talk about Heritage Guide. Okay, so it says that right here, the migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit shall not be prohibited by Congress prior to the year 1808, but a tax or duty may be imposed on such importation not exceeding $10 for each person. So this is a hiatus where Congress had the power to regulate trade either with foreign countries or between the states. But in this case, for 20 years, they said hands off slavery until that point. And to their credit, to the day that this became available for action, they imposed a ban on any further importation of Africans as slaves into the United States to the day. It's not even a stretch to say that the Constitution supported slavery, because they went at great lengths to deal with this compromise without giving any real credibility to slavery in doing so. And like I said, as soon as they could, they actually outlawed the importation of Africans as slaves. So let's go on to the next one. And this one is kind of like it is, an argument I hear a lot is that the Constitution is racist. And so we need to ask ourselves, is the Constitution racist? And one thing that's brought up is the 3/5 clause, which people argue, it states that slaves are 3/5 of a person. If you read the Constitution, that's not what the 3/5 clause says at all. In fact, again, it does not use the word slave. Okay, so it's not referring to when it talks about slaves, it refers to them as other persons. So for a second time in the Constitution, it refers to those who were in slavery as persons rather than property or slaves at all. And it dealt specifically with two things. One was representation in Congress, and the other was taxation. And so those two things, it doesn't state that it shall count a person as 3/5 of a person. It says 3/5 of the enumeration of other persons shall count toward representation in Congress. And again, you want to stretch that argument further. People say, well, that meant that only 3/5 of the slaves could vote. Hello, slaves couldn't vote at all,
Right.
So they had no representation. So allowing for full representation of the population at the time actually would have given the slaveholding states much more power in Congress, and doing anything would have been very difficult. So the 3/5 compromise then just dealt with that representation, limiting it then to 3/5 of what it referred to as other persons. So essentially, other persons who were living within the states at the time, who we would refer to as citizens, of course, not somebody who's an immigrant unless they become a citizen, but citizens is what we refer to them at the time, just people. So that really is the crux of it. What's that?
I said that kind of closes down the argument.
Yep. Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah. There's really no way to bring that in and argue that it wasn't. The other one, of course, is voting rights.
Right.
And again, we have to go back and look at the context of history. Very few nations in history ever allowed everyone to vote. Okay. With the exception of some of the Indian confederations, maybe. I can't say for sure. It was never that everybody got to vote. It was property owners, more or less. So if you look at the laws on the books at the time, in the late 1700s, they kind of reflected the rest of the world at the time. Hey, if you own property, then you could vote because, you got some skin in the game, so to speak.
Right.
But over time, and again, it didn't seek to change norms immediately, but we talked about before the Constitution being an imperfect document or an unfinished document. We realized that, true liberty overall is for everybody to have representation, but that's something we need to work toward as we go forward. And so that's how we end up with the I think
you were mentioning this link, this
Amendment and the 20th Amendment.
Which amendments were they again?
I think it's the 15th and the 20th. 15th.
And you can look that up. What was the link you were just at again? That was heritage.org.
Heritage.org/Constitution. And that's going to bring you to the Heritage Foundation's Guide to the Constitution, which is really a good
it's better than free beer.
Oh yeah, this is a collection of essays written by some of the top professors in the United States when it comes to the Constitution, and no holds barred when it comes to their essays in dealing with this. Of course, Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank, and so that's who they collect essays from. So, but they really do a good job of explaining a lot of these things in those essays. So if you want to read, if you want to find out more about the
I'll throw that in the comments for people too.
Yeah, go to heritage.org/Constitution and go down to the 3/5 clause and click on it, and it'll bring you to an essay on the 3/5 clause.
Well, cool.
And,
what's our next topic?
Well, wait. Before we run away from slavery,
yeah,
I want to just touch on the Civil War and slavery in general, and a lot of people forget why we fought the Civil War, and it wasn't for slavery. We had, if you look at the onset of
I will argue that it was.
yeah, it allowed it to happen, but the secession of states from the Union is what was the initial onset of the Civil War. However, Lincoln found that
But
the secession,
why did they?
it
Right.
wasn't
Why
as
did they
pure.
secede? Why did they secede?
Why did they secede?
Mhm.
Because they were losing state rights. And yes,
Well,
the narrative
that's
was slavery, and Lincoln used that to his advantage to bring in the rest of the northern states that were actually they couldn't care less from the beginning. So
okay.
if it
So
wasn't used properly, the
let
Civil
me
War
go back to
wouldn't
this
have
a
happened.
little bit. Okay, because this is a narrative that was drummed up by the South after they lost the Civil War. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when they wanted to venerate their soldiers and try to argue that they were correct, they created this narrative of states' rights. But if you look at the constitutions, because every single state that seceded from the Union rewrote their constitution, and they enshrined the institution of slavery in their constitutions. And furthermore, they seceded. They made it very clear that they were seceding because they thought that Lincoln would just single-handedly abolish slavery, I guess, on an executive order like you see today.
Right.
But they left specifically because of slavery, and they pushed to include that. That's why I push back on that, is because we've been told, yeah, it's states' rights, but that is an argument that was brought up by the South, or drummed up really by the South, to make themselves look better. But the truth of the matter is they left in order to protect their own institution of slavery. They saw the writing on the wall with Lincoln's election, and decided to hit the eject button to protect what they thought was important. So
That's not a Top Gun reference there, but yeah, we pulled the
yeah. So I mean, it's a good point, and that's not to talk down about states' rights, because the states are not
a big deal, man.
While there's a supremacy clause in the Constitution, the idea of federalism is that both are actually sovereign within their own spheres. So there's supposed to be a hard line between what the federal government does and what the state governments do. And there's been a pushback for a long time, a shoving match between the federal government and state governments on where that line is. So state rights is a real thing, but again, that was just drummed up after the fact to try to make it sound that way. But if you read the original documents, which I have, if you go to wallbuilders.com, in fact, they have it there.
What a good website. I don't have that one in my banners. I need to put that one up for people too.
Yeah,
that is one of my all-time favorite sites.
Oh my goodness. They list all of those constitutions from the southern states that seceded, and so you can read them yourselves, and it's eye-opening to see. That's why they seceded. That's what it was really about.
That's David Barton's website.
Yes.
Pull it up for people so they can see what it looks like.
And in a future episode, I will talk about, and I can never do it in a 1 minute, where we talk about, is the Constitution a secular document? That's more time than I think all the rest of these combined. He did an hour and a half lecture at Liberty University, and I was a student and had to go through that. And actually, I should say I was a teacher, and I had to go through that and teach my class and teach my students on it.
Barton's stuff is awesome. I'm so thankful that Teresa pointed that this stuff out. I became a big fan of him after.
That's one I knew about before Teresa, but yeah, I mean,
He's old. He's OG. He's
yeah,
trying to point out where he's at
most
in the
definitely.
timeline.
So let's bring up the next one.
Okay. So, question number 3, west of our show here is: does the Constitution create a wall between government and religion? Perfect timing for David Barton.
Yeah, really, wall builders, and
Yeah.
Let's when people say this, that there's a wall of separation between government and religion, they're referring to the First Amendment. I should say to both the First Amendment and to Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist, written in I think 1801,
Sure.
when he was president. Okay, and from that, because Thomas Jefferson does reference in that letter a wall of separation. However, take it with a grain of salt, because he's not saying in there that the two shall never meet. What he's saying in that letter is he's reiterating the First Amendment and the provisions of the First Amendment. And if I go down to it real quick,
Sure.
and there's a lot to it. But go ahead. You want to pull that up?
It's up.
Okay. So over there, stare close at your screen. Let me see if I can actually blow that up a little bit bigger. That's as big as I think I can get it. Oh, wait. No, it's got a lot better. Hold on, folks. Sorry.
Buckle up. And now you're in a mobile site.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go back and
back just one step. Just hit the -1 one time there.
Okay.
Yeah. There you go. That's as big as it gets without breaking it. So where are we going right now on this list?
Okay, so we're going to the First Amendment to the Constitution, and so we talk about the establishment. There are two clauses in the First Amendment, okay, and one is, here we go, there we go. So the first clause is called the Establishment Clause, and it states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. And what that means is that Congress, or the federal government, it didn't even address the state governments at the time. It only dealt with the federal government. It states that the federal government will not establish an official religion for the country. Several of the states, I think majority of them, had established religions on the books in their constitutions, based on the culture of their area. You go to the Puritan North, or to the Baptist South, you'll see that on the books. But specifically in this case, though, it's saying that government really has no business establishing any religion and forcing people to practice a religion. Okay, so that is that's the Establishment Clause. The second part is, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, referred to as the Free Exercise Clause. So if we say them together, it says that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And the operational part there is shall make no law. So Congress can't really make a law either way. They can't say you
respecting
must,
or prohibiting is the proper
right,
way.
exactly. They can't say you must, and they can't say you can't.
Yeah, we like to split that right there down the middle.
And that
it's a
is
separation of church and state.
It does not mean that you can't bring religious argument into the public square. And right. If you look, in fact, at some of the first acts of the legislature of the new United States. The first one was the extension of the Northwest Territory Act
Right.
in
1883, Matt. I feel it coming on after he starts mentioning that.
So the Northwest Ordinance Act actually included for the provision of what we would call chaplains to go to these territories that the United States held that were not states. So paid for by the U.S. government. The same government now that just passed the First Amendment also sent priests to these outlying areas that were territories at the time, paid for by the U.S. government. Oh, okay. So understand that obviously they didn't take this hard line that we hear from folks today who want to keep religion out of schools. In fact, they can't. They can't at all. So if say South Carolina elects a hardcore Baptist or a Seventh-day Adventist that happens to believe, in strict biblical codes, he's the representative. He can put those into law as long as he's not violating the free exercise of religion or an establishment of religion.
I thought I'd bring something up for you that would entertain you here for a second, Ben. I know I'm kind of throwing a curveball at you.
Well, I was going to say a lot of, remember blue laws, like you can't sell alcohol on Sundays.
Yeah.
That's actually taken from the Old Testament of the Bible. So it's a Judeo-Christian idea, but it was on the laws for a very long time, and in some places still exists. Go down to Georgia and you cannot buy alcohol on Sundays. What was the screen there?
Oh yeah, sorry. I wanted to throw this back up. This is a sentence diagram of the First Amendment. Which is,
wow.
We've seen that before.
I think this would make a good T-shirt for you.
Yeah, really.
Or respecting the establishment or exercise of religion.
It's really the First Amendment is one sentence, and it is definitely a run-on sentence.
Yeah, absolutely. But we don't even teach sentence diagramming in our public schools so I don't know what guys, we need to diagram.
In private schools, we do.
That's right.
The school my kids go to under scholarship, they still teach this. So, and a lot of homeschool education texts still teach this.
Yeah, we do too. But
okay,
I had to look it up.
So we understand though that it's really, if anything, it's a one-way wall. Okay, it doesn't prevent religious ideas from coming into government, but it does prevent government from forcing expression or prohibiting expression. So, like I said, it's really one way. What's the next one?
The next question up for bid, if we're going to play game show style, is socialism compatible with the Constitution? Ben, do you think you could answer this question for me? Matt,
what would you say to that? What would you guess?
I would say socialism,
the best guy in the world,
are not compatible with the Constitution.
I'm gonna side with you on that one, but let's hear Ben's explanation.
The reason why you see the progressive left criticizing the Constitution so hard is because they understand intrinsically that socialism is absolutely incompatible with our Constitution, and they want to see the Constitution changed to make it compatible. And in order to do that, they need to reduce our rights to give them the authority to do what they want to do. So understand that socialism, a lot of people, when you say socialism, they think of social programs. And social programs exist in any country, but that doesn't make them socialist. what makes a country socialist is when the government tries to control both the economy and our private lives. Okay. And to the extent that they do that, they go from socialist to fascist or Marxist or communist, that is.
Right.
So understand
Marxism
that
is just a, wouldn't you say that's just a tool or a methodology of enforcing communism?
Yeah, well, it's a general term. You can encompass almost everything under Marxism.
I honestly, it's been such a crazy 2 years. I've never really truly understood Marxism until the past 2 years.
Right.
Marxist socialism technically is not what you think of.
Right. It's not
in
standard.
Russia.
Right.
Those are, referring back to my the lecture I did on
liberty,
different forms of government. It would be that Fabian socialism. But the problem with Fabian socialism or the original Marxist socialism is it never lasts. It can't. It soon wastes away its resources, and it's forced to either give up or double down into that one of those next two steps and really start imposing itself on the people with some very heavy tyrannical methods.
Yeah.
So socialism as an economic system cannot survive on its own.
Well, don't you think that even
it requires the government to go the next step to do that?
With our electoral process that we live with in the United States today, wasn't that like the planning and foresight of our forefathers to necessarily basically set up a system that would not allow itself to go too long without righting the ship? It's a keel on the ship, so to speak. I mean, so even if the things that we see that are happening right now all get passed to our disgust and demise, it's just
you're talking about another question that I didn't even address this time is one of the arguments is that the Constitution is too it makes a government that is incapable of action.
Okay, I don't know how you would phrase that question.
Yeah, there's a way. There's
a way to put it.
What does the government do anything?
Gridlock. It makes government too subject to gridlock. And believe it or not, that was actually a feature. It was planned that would happen. That way, no one faction could dominate another faction.
Which is the big fear right now. But I mean, even
right,
we're freaked out about the time frame, but that's why there's only so many years we can retain that level of power. I mean,
well, and it's also why we see wave elections, is because when people get a taste of
the opposite side, they spit it out.
It ends up being this the next election is punishment for the faction that is in control because they did a bad job or they offended the people some way. So this election, like I talked about earlier, with CNN is even predicting it to be a bad year for Democrats.
Well, I realize we're flagging ourselves by even saying the word election. Now Facebook's going to be really paying attention to what we're talking about.
Right.
But it's interesting. What we're really talking about is what is the intent of the framers?
Right.
How well did they plan for certain things that we are experiencing?
Well, the idea is that it takes a lot of agreement to do something.
Right.
And the only way you get a lot of agreement is to get different factions to agree together.
Or you got to steal it.
Right. Or you steal it. So
you can't get enough agreement on your end.
So that is a feature and not a
in general terms. I'd like to point that's just in general terms. Right. We're not saying anyone's ever done that, historically speaking.
Oh gosh,
20,
our
yeah,
president has used that system. So
yeah.
the
What's our,
leftists have used the very system that they're complaining about.
so back to, does it create a wall? Um, I,
Go ahead.
I find that the separation of church and state is one of the most misunderstood phrases that we use in the English vernacular, because it's not a constitutional phrase.
And it also shows that it's another demonstration of the fact that the Supreme Court, though it is the final decision, doesn't mean it's always the right decision. And so
we're learning right now with our Supreme Court reversing certain decisions that we thought were set in stone.
Right. And, so we're, you're referring to Roe. But, you go look at some other well-known cases where, for example, Plessy v. Ferguson upheld separate but equal doctrine, and which was then overturned later with Brown v. Board. Okay. So, the Supreme Court does at times recognize the mistakes it makes. Unfortunately, this is one time where they haven't recognized the mistake and corrected it.
I know exactly what you're talking about, Ben. Let me look them up right now.
So
that's why we have.
Oh, you're Plessy and Brown.
Right.
Plessy was in 1898, I think, and it was, argument to get rid of segregation, and it failed. And they ruled in Plessy that separate but equal was still constitutional because it treated everybody, air quotes, equally.
Right.
But in Brown v. Board, they said there's no way that's possible. If you treat people separately, there's no way that you could claim that it's equal. Right. So, and that's in one reference. Then you go to Roe, and now the current one coming up, where they're correcting. And by the way, they're not killing abortion. What they're saying is that issue belongs in the states. That's what's going to happen with that decision.
Sorry, I know. I realized I backtracked one question on you. It was just something that just like stuck with me. That even when we're talking about socialism, one of the complaints that we see is that we're moving into an era in which our government is like defining what is and is not acceptable for religious thought. And I don't necessarily think that we are teaching enough about that,
because you have folks on the hard left who are pushing against the idea of individual liberty,
right?
And their concern is the community as taking precedence over individual liberty,
right?
Whereas our Constitution was written with the idea of individual liberty. It coupled, by the way, with responsibility. We had responsibility to be good citizens.
Well, if you're ready, we can bump into the next most fun question that you have on your list.
Let's move on.
Does the Second Amendment allow for gun control?
Let's deal with the other one first. We'll get to that one in a second. So the other one is the National Guard question.
Oh, you had them sorted. Sorry, I didn't have them in the right order. There you go. Is the National Guard well regulated?
Isn't this just this is prescient for conversation today with the latest mass shooting?
Isn't the National Guard? Isn't that our regulated militia?
Calls for gun control, and one of the arguments here is that the National Guard is our well-regulated militia, making private ownership unnecessary. Well, not only did the Constitution recently twice affirm our individual right to keep and bear arms, thereby affirming the reading of the Second Amendment straight, but we need to understand the difference between the National Guard a regular military and a militia. Okay, so um, the regular military, I think we all understand. The National Guard is a little bit harder because it's a 50-50 mix of a state military and a federal military. And the National Guard can be actually federalized at any time and deployed, though the idea of the National Guard is it's an extra military for defense of the homeland.
Right.
Though lately they've been deployed overseas as well.
Which is odd. I mean, when that started happening, that was a big risk.
Afghanistan. Afghanistan is when we started to see the National Guard be deployed overseas.
Was the National Guard deployed in Iraq when Bush created the whole weapons of mass destruction thing?
Originally, it was all regular military, but later on, National Guard came in there as well.
Just the back of my memory, I have that National Guard being called into Iraq in the beginning. But yeah, I think you're right about Afghanistan. That was, I think that was the most optically evident example of the National Guard.
The reason why the National Guard was called overseas really dealt with the length of those engagements of those two battle arenas. When you have something last 20 years, it really exhausts the strength of your regular military. So they augmented with National Guard units to kind of help reconstitute the strength of the regular military. That was really why they started deploying them. But we need to understand, though, that just because states have a National Guard doesn't mean that they're a militia. There is a difference between them. And in fact, the Illinois State Constitution lays out the definition of a militia. And it says that all able-bodied males between 18 to, 70 or something, 65 or
45. I believe
What's
I believe it's 45.
Oh, good. I'm out of the loop. Thank God.
Okay, well, it says that essentially every able-bodied male is considered part of the militia. So that makes it clear that at least here in one of the most liberal states in the country that they still look at a militia as separate from the National Guard.
Right.
But this is all beside the point, okay? Because this question here fails to understand that first part of the Second Amendment. The first part of the Second Amendment is really just, if you will, a preamble of the operating clause. It explains why they are protecting this right. And if you remember, in the beginning, under the Articles of Confederation, there was no standing military. There were only state militias, or
I'm diagramming again.
That could be the back of the T-shirt.
Yeah.
And so George Washington, when he was president of the Constitutional Convention, argued that, based on his experience, that militias were poorly trained and poorly disciplined and poorly supplied. The only way to deal with a real existential threat like England again, or France, if it ever came to that, was to have a professional standing military. And that's why those clauses are included in the original making of the Constitution. In giving the powers of the legislature to create a land force, a naval force, etc. So as a guard against that, because again, we look at the history, and we can even refer to recent history with this. If you look at the history of standing militaries, governments have a history of using their standing militaries against their own populace.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's not a great thing about history, but
it's not even a distant history. All we have to do is look at what Australia did with regard to weapon confiscation, and then the COVID vaccine, and how they treated their own citizens and used their military to enforce their laws against its own citizens. So the founding fathers in that, they understood that. And so they're saying, because we need a standing military, but we want to protect liberty, we're going to guarantee that, and the rest of it says here, and this is the operational part. If we go to that screen, it says the right of the people. It doesn't say militia, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so, again, it's people.
Highlighted
It's
in
not
the
even
phone
talking
segment
about
over
militias
there,
at
right
this
here.
point.
Yep.
National Guard, the people. And so that really, the National Guard argument is really a poor one and shows a lack of education to anybody who tries to use that. But I guarantee some university professors will try to use that argument.
Well, it
because
wasn't even just recently. I think it was it last year or the year before? The whole shall not be infringed, and magazine size and different things were brought to the federal courts in California, and they were very clear in shooting down everything that they're bringing up as far as types of weapons and magazine size. I think,
right.
The founding fathers were really clear about, the literal arms that they were talking. They didn't say, well, you can use this, you can use a musket only, or you can use this. They, what's available for the military should be available for standard
For its citizens. Now, and this is the thing is gun owners or gun rights activists are reasonable people. So you don't see them arguing, for example, for the right to keep and bear nuclear weapons.
We're reasonable people.
And so we're not arguing for the right to keep and bear, weapons of mass destruction, but we have the right, and the whole intent of the Second Amendment is protection
against a tyrannical government.
Yeah,
that
right?
is. So
Sorry
protection
to
of your
finish
person,
I want to show how in sync
protection
we really
of your right to life and your property is absolutely paramount when it comes to talking about Second Amendment. But understand that was not why we have the Second Amendment. We have it because we have a standing military and a real threat of a government trying to force its citizens to do or not do things, which would violate our liberties.
So let's take a look at the 2,000-pound donkey in the room, which is all of these. Obviously, you're looking at the mass shootings, and that right. Seems to be the whether false flags can still happen.
Hold that thought.
They happened for a reason.
I think we're going into the next.
Oh, we're going into.
Bring up the next question.
All right, go ahead.
Because what you're talking about really addresses this question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
we said we're reasonable, so we say
for gun control.
For gun control.
That's our next question, and that is a common. This is our current national debate. Doesn't even allow for it. So, Ben, I'd rather hear from you than Matthew McConaughey. Well, he's slightly better looking than you.
Who's that?
But Matthew McConaughey.
Matthew McConaughey.
But he seems to be a puppet to the left all of a sudden.
So go ahead and make your comment about mass shootings here.
Yeah.
All right. So
now's the time.
All right. So now's the time. My timing's off. So when you look at the issue of mass shootings, obviously there's a narrative built around it against or for gun control. But when you look at the issue, it's and quite honestly, the progressives, the communists, the those on the left want to focus on the issue of being the gun, whereas if you look at the location of where all of these situations, these incidents happen, they're always in a location that is literally under gun control, where they have the sticker on the window and says no guns. So what you're allowing for is a location where they can go, and it's perfect because they know there's going to be no resistance. They can do what they want when they want, and that's the issue.
There's actually a hidden elephant in the room with that whole discussion, and you're absolutely right. There are a couple really elephants. So it's crowded room. It's not just one. There's two, and one is mental health.
Yes,
and we need to really ask ourselves what's going on with mental health, and why aren't we catching these individuals before they make these purchases, or oftentimes illegally make these purchases when it comes to guns. In fact, this latest shooter there's question whether he bought them legally, because what he bought was a lot of money, thousands of dollars.
Right. And let's
goes back to
let's put a little asterisk on that. You can continue with your thought, but
okay.
The mental health side of it is even the latest mass shooting at the school. They're now coming out saying the FBI knew about this individual 2 to 3 years ago and have been watching him. So again, where's the failure? Is it mental health, or is it someone not doing what they should be doing?
Well, obviously there's someone not doing what they should be doing here. And you see some attempts to address this with these red flag laws, but those violate the Constitution because they violate due process. However, there's no problem, if with a law that would challenge somebody's mental health status, especially if they have some kind of record, like you mentioned with the FBI, that would mark them so they couldn't purchase guns in the first place. And definitely, I would be very careful about any kind of what we say about mental health and gun restriction, because one, individuals still maintain the rights. Two, this is a positive, or it's I usually don't use that word, a positive law or a positive right, I should say, that people have with regard to protecting themselves. So it starts out that they have the right, and there's a very real concern that maybe state legislatures will try to get around that whole thing by saying, look, if you're taking any kind of medications for mental health, you can't buy weapons or ammunition. Well, that's a blanket statement, which again violates the Constitution because it's too broad.
Right.
And it also violates individuals' rights because not just the vast majority, but 99.9% of people with mental health issues are very peaceful individuals. They're trying to get themselves to a better place.
Right.
The other elephant in the room is, what have we done that has created this condition where we have these mass shooters? And for example, little history lesson, my mom, when she was in high school, was on the rifle team.
Well, we had a rifle team in our high school.
They used 22. This was she was in high school.
Had one, yeah.
They used 22 long range rifles, and they shot them in the school up in a little rifle range just for that purpose.
We We still have one in our basement of our Quincy Junior High School. I don't know if it's still being used, but yeah, I mean, I grew up that way.
Yeah. When I grew up, we
also
had
the same thing. Kids would come to school with guns in their vehicles. You know, they'd have a gun
in
rack
the back of a truck was not uncommon in 1990.
Yeah.
and there were no
shootings. That's right.
So really, we should be asking ourselves, what has changed that this is concerned? This is now considered. Excuse me. This is now considered an option. Okay. I have some very strong feelings about that, or opinions. One of them being, you know, when you remove the idea of the special nature of our existence as being a creation of God, and you start teaching kids that they are a cosmic accident and their life has no meaning, you probably really shouldn't be surprised that they're going to start acting that way.
I don't know.
And again, you know, we can probably go on about that.
Showing my hometown.
the rifle team, national
2017.
There you go.
I don't know if it still exists today, but I mean, this is a common sight, and we don't have those same issues. So
it should be there,
right?
It's not in Illinois. Illinois forbids any 22 rifles. They do not allow even pellet rifles in Chicago. When I taught in high school, I ran an air rifle team which used a 177 pellet. We were allowed to do that, but that's because we're outside of Chicago. So when you start talking about gun control, and you've already alluded to this, Matt, that even California Supreme Court said, no, you can't really infringe. Infringe means limit.
Right.
You can't put limits or curb people's right to bear arms. And so the idea of gun control, and this is why progressive liberals don't like, I should say, the progressive left. I call myself a classic liberal.
You're a classic.
The progressive left, why they don't like the Constitution is because it is so point blank in protecting our rights. It didn't give us our rights; it protects them, and that should be understood. So, so even things that are technically, you'd be hard pressed to make a good argument for saying banning somebody from owning a grenade launcher,
right,
under the Constitution. I mean, they're expensive as all get out, but technically, under the Constitution, there is no good argument for curtailing gun rights, or gun control, as it were. In fact, it's like we said. In fact, the freer a state is with its gun laws, the more peaceful it tends to be, the less crime and the less violent crime it tends to have.
Yep.
And that's not a reason in itself, but it's an indicator that is the correct way to go. And I think that would be how I would say it. So
if anyone has any comments, we have a couple of viewers still on. If there's any comments, please make sure to pop them down into the comment section. We'd be glad to address them. We'd love to include you into this discussion. And if not, it's not a big deal. We will have more of these moving forward. Every Sunday we do try to get together. We are actually looking at reformatting the show and then trying to get to more of a sweet spot. I don't know if Sunday is the best time slot for us. It was for a period of time. I'm not sure if it is today.
We'll work it out.
Especially we're working it out. Summer months on the weekend might be a little difficult.
Right. We may have to shift it seasonally.
Yeah.
So I think we've kind of put a nail in the coffin on the gun control issue. And I mean, we could certainly talk about individual things. And again,
That could be its own show.
The gun owners and gun rights activists aren't reasonable people. We're not calling for everybody to own a machine gun.
Right.
We've kind of accepted a control on that, or a limit on that. But that's only because we've accepted it, not because the Constitution upholds a ban on machine guns.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So
Next question.
That would be an expensive hobby.
Right. It is
Oh gosh, yes.
With the cost of ammo, there's no way.
Well, if you mass produce them, they get cheaper, but still, you're talking about a $10,000 purchase currently.
Yeah.
And then the license to maintain it is you have to pay that every year, and it's expensive.
Well, Ben,
Do we have another question?
I don't have any sitting out there right now, but Ben, I wanted to make sure to thank you for taking the time to go through those. I think this is a great segment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's stuff that you want to cover as far as the upcoming primary. I know that Matt, by the way, if anybody doesn't know this or not, Matt is still a write-in candidate. So you want to make sure to take the time to, if you're in Elgin or Barrington, what areas also are you in?
It goes from Carpentersville into Elgin, then makes a left-hand turn going east through Streamwood, Hanover Park.
Out in this area, out in the northwest-ish suburbs. Take a left at the guy walking.
What's the district number again?
It's
22.
22. If you're in the 22nd district,
remember, folks, that one, understand that the polls are already open, so you can go into a poll that's open and vote already. And you don't have to wait then to June 28th. So make sure that you set some time between now and June 28th to actually do your civic duty and vote. But I would encourage you to go a little further. Make sure you find out who the write-in candidates are.
Yes,
because it's not just that. There are tons of write-in candidates for a various number of reasons this election cycle, usually dealing with the redistricting that took so long this time.
That had a major effect on our ballots up this year. And
sure. So make sure you know who those write-in candidates are. And it's okay to take a list in with you that you create people you want to vote for. Especially do that for judges. Because looking at the names of judges, when you get inside the poll and you're just looking at them, you're like, I forget who I wanted to vote for.
Right.
Because there are so many and so many different positions. It's good to understand. It's good to remember. It's good to write those down so you know who you want to vote.
Well, and just so you know, I'm looking right now at our inbox, and we don't have any emails from anyone. But if you have any questions about who you want to put in for your write-in candidates, who do you need to vote for, any question you have about voting in our electoral system, please make sure to let us know on our email address. It is rebuildillinois.org@gmail.com. Or make sure to let us know on our Telegram group. We'd be glad to interface with you right there. That's
also,
go ahead.
Also, if you have any more questions about the Constitution, maybe there's something you heard and you're like, I don't know, is that quite right? Hey, send it to us and we'll address it in a future episode.
Absolutely.
We already talked about one such thing that we could talk about. So we definitely want to get those questions out there to people and answer them for you.
Absolutely.
And let me bring up one more little point. Due to the extreme amount of candidates running as Republicans, and many of those are America First candidates too, don't forget that money helps as well. I don't like asking for donations, but I tell you what, the difference between a win and a loss is the funding for each campaign.
Sure.
Find your local, your district for
Ben
Senate.
has been through it. He knows.
Yeah.
And
get over that not wanting to ask, because there's just no way around it. those flyers we talked about Richard Irvin, the
Oh my God.
It doesn't have a rich backer behind them.
Thousands of them.
Yeah, so you buy a stack of 2,000 push cards or door hangers, you're spending a couple $100 to get those, and I mean, it adds up quickly. It really, really does, and just that your website and ads and all that are just so expensive.
Yep.
We need people to pony up.
If you got a phone, take it out, point it at this little QR code. It should take you to our link tree and give you the opportunity to actually see everything that's coming up on this link here. And we keep that thing up to date. We have links to not just our group, but many other conservative Illinois groups. We're trying to be the juicy caramel center of everything happening in Illinois politics as far as conservatives are involved, because the GOP's dropped the ball. And that's what we're here to do, is to try and kind of pick that up. We talked about that a little bit, Matt, the other day. That really is becoming kind of the clarion call, the edict of sorts that we're realizing is what we need to do with this organization, is do all the things that we wish the GOP was already doing for us. They're not doing it.
Regarding the funding again, don't be embarrassed. I know a lot of people say, well, all I got is $5 or $10.
Anything.
I'll tell you what, if you do $5 or $10 a month to help a candidate, that it goes a long way.
Any candidate.
That's a yard sign.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You have to remember that the issue we have right now is who's controlling this state, and the funding that they had, and we know the issues we had with Mike Madigan, but he funded literally entirely everybody in office right now, and that money is still there and in their coffers. So we have to counteract it somehow, and it's got to be through the people.
Well, Ben, I'm going to give you the final word. We are going to wrap this one up. I want to make sure that everyone also checks out rebuildillinois.org as well. I know that the ticker is running down below. We've got the QR code. We've got a million ways for you to connect with us. We are really trying to build a community for you guys.
So just remember, hey, folks, we are here for you. And so your questions help fuel our future shows. And your participation is always welcome in this. Hey, get on live with us and share comments. We often post comments out there. And you can expect, like I said, you can expect a show here in the near future where we'll definitely address some more of these criticisms or questions of the Constitution. Until then, thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Matt, thanks for joining us. Anyone else? We look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Yep.
Take care.
Alive and well, I'm wide awake. Won't take your brand, I'm not your slave. You serve your God, Lord of the flies. I pity you and you mean mine. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. Your bloody mouth unsatisfied. God sees the trap you set for me. He'll not be mocked, I will be free. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Your fear will not make me hate. I won't march in your masked parade. Your hollow threats won't shut me up. I won't bow down, enough's enough. You say you'll give us what we need, as if you own the air we breathe. Stand up 100 million strong. Thought we'd lie down, well you thought wrong. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give in, never give up, never back down, never surrender, never surrender. Oh, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on on going. Jesus with me every step. Just keep going, keep on going. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just keep going, keep on going. Jesus closer than my breath. Just keep going, keep on going. We will not bend, we will not break. How dare you touch what God gave? We'll never give up, never back down. We'll never give up, never back down. We'll never give up, never